The blood on Diana Zimmerman's white lace cuff wouldn't wash out. She scrubbed frantically at the fabric with trembling fingers, plunging her hands repeatedly into the basin of water that had long since turned pink. Outside, the Texas sun beat down mercilessly on Brownsville, a border town that had witnessed her suffering for 3 long years. Her husband Harold would return from his business at the saloon soon, and any evidence of her latest clumsiness would only fuel his rage. Deanna winced as she lifted her arm, the bruising from last night's altercation still fresh beneath her high-necked blouse. At 23, she had already resigned herself to a short, painful life. Harold Zimmerman, 20 years her senior and the town's most prosperous merchant, had shown his true nature mere weeks after their wedding in 1875. What had begun as critical comments about her housekeeping had escalated to slaps, then beatings that left her bedridden for days. Last night, when she'd accidentally dropped his favorite whiskey glass, he'd thrown her against the sideboard with such force that she'd struck her head and passed out. When she awoke, Harold was snoring in their bed, and she was still on the floor. The cut on her scalp had bled profusely, staining her sleeve. Now, as she gave up on salvaging the cuff, Deanna caught her reflection in the small mirror above the washstand. Her once vibrant chestnut hair hung limply around her pale face, and the spark had long since died in her hazel eyes. The sounds of hoofbeats outside the window drew her attention. Not Harold's gait, these were horses moving at a steady trot, not his usual drunken gallop. Deanna peered through the curtains to see a small group of cowboys riding into town, dusty from the trail. One man in particular caught her eye, tall and broad-shouldered atop a magnificent chestnut stallion, his face shadowed by a worn leather hat. Deanna watched as they dismounted outside the general store that Harold owned. The tall cowboy stretched, revealing sun-weathered skin and a lean, muscular build. When he removed his hat to wipe his brow, she caught a glimpse of sandy blonde hair and a strong jawline. Something about his easy manner made her heart ache with longing for a freedom she had never known. As if sensing her gaze, the cowboy suddenly looked up toward her window. Deanna gasped and stepped back, letting the curtain fall back into place. She had no business admiring strange men, especially not with Harold due home any minute. Still, for the first time in months, she felt something other than fear and despair, a dangerous spark of curiosity. She hurried to change her blouse, selecting a high-necked garment that concealed the worst of her bruises, and pinned her hair carefully to hide the gash on her scalp. As she worked, her mind drifted back to the cowboy. Who was he? Where had he come from? Would he be staying in Brownsville long? Such thoughts were foolish, Deanna knew. Harold's jealousy was legendary, and if he even suspected she had looked at another man, the consequences would be severe. She had learned to keep her eyes downcast whenever they were in public, to avoid even the appearance of impropriety. Yet she couldn't help wondering what it might be like to speak freely, to laugh openly, to live without constant fear. The front door slammed, jolting Deanna from her reverie. Harold's heavy footsteps echoed through the house, each one sending a tremor of dread through her body. "Deanna," he bellowed. "Where are you, woman?" She hurried downstairs, keeping her eyes lowered as she entered the parlor. "I'm here, Harold," he grunted, tossing his hat onto the settee. At 43, Harold Zimmerman still cut an imposing figure, tall and broad with dark hair graying at the temples. His business acumen and ruthless dealings had made him one of the wealthiest men in Brownsville, but the jovial facade he presented to the town concealed a vicious temper that only Deanna witnessed. "We have cattle buyers in town," he said, unbuttoning his waistcoat. "Cowboys from up north looking to drive a herd back to Kansas. I've invited their foreman for dinner this evening." Diana's heart sank. Preparing a meal for Harold's business associates always ended badly. Either the food wasn't to his liking, or he imagined she had looked too long at their guest, or spoken out of turn. "What time shall I have dinner ready?" she asked quietly. 7 o'clock, and wear something presentable. I won't have you embarrassing me." Diana nodded and retreated to the kitchen, mind racing as she assessed what provisions they had for an impressive meal. As she worked, she couldn't help wondering if the dinner guest might be the tall cowboy she had seen from the window. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. At precisely 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Diana smoothed down her best blue dress and checked that her hair was neatly pinned before following Harold to the door. Her heart nearly stopped when she saw the visitor. It was indeed the cowboy from earlier, though now cleaned up, his blonde hair neatly combed, dressed in a simple but clean shirt and vest. "Mr. Zimmerman, thank you for the invitation," the man said, extending a hand. "Wade O'Malley, trail boss for the Mitchell outfit." "Come in, O'Malley," Harold said, shaking his hand firmly. "Allow me to introduce my wife, Diana." Wade O'Malley's blue eyes met hers, and Diana felt a jolt of something she hadn't experienced in years: recognition, perhaps, of another soul that understood loneliness. She quickly lowered her gaze and offered a small curtsy. "Mrs. Zimmerman, it's a pleasure," Wade said, his voice deep and resonant with a slight Western drawl. Throughout dinner, Diana served the men silently, speaking only when directly addressed. She could feel Wade's eyes on her occasionally, curious and assessing. Once, when she refilled his water glass, she noticed him studying the faded bruise on her wrist where her sleeve had ridden up. His expression darkened momentarily before he returned his attention to Harold's business proposition. "So you need 70 head for your Kansas buyer," Harold was saying. "I can provide that, but the price has gone up since your last visit to these parts." "I'm authorized to pay market rate, nothing more," Wade replied evenly. "There are other ranchers between here and San Antonio who might be more reasonable." Harold's face flushed with anger, but he maintained his composure in front of the guest. "Perhaps we can reach a compromise. Diana, bring us the brandy from my study." While fetching the brandy, Diana paused before the small mirror in the hallway. Something about Wade O'Malley's presence had awakened a desperate yearning within her. For 3 years, she had endured Harold's abuse, believing she deserved no better, that there was no escape. But tonight, seeing the concern in the cowboy's eyes when he noticed her bruises, she wondered if there might be another way. When she returned with the brandy, the men had moved to the parlor. She poured their drinks with steady hands, though her heart was racing. As she handed Wade his glass, their fingers brushed, and she felt an electric current pass between them. "Thank you, Mrs. Zimmerman," he said softly. She nodded and turned away, but not before catching the intensity in his gaze. It wasn't pity she saw there, but something far more dangerous: understanding. The evening progressed with business talk, and Diana was eventually dismissed to clean up. As she worked in the kitchen, she heard the men's voices rise in disagreement, then Harold's distinctive false laugh that always preceded his worst outbursts. Minutes later, the front door opened and closed. Diana held her breath, waiting for the inevitable storm. Harold appeared in the kitchen doorway, his face contorted with rage. "That insolent saddle tramp thinks he can come into my home and dictate prices to me." He paced the floor, fists clenching and unclenching. "And you, making eyes at him all evening." "Harold, no, I didn't." His open hand caught her cheek with such force that she stumbled backward against the stove. The hot iron scorched through her dress, drawing a cry of pain from her lips. "Don't lie to me." Harold grabbed her by the throat. "I saw how you looked at him." Is that what you want? Some filthy cowboy pawing at you. Deanna couldn't speak, couldn't breathe as his fingers tightened. Black spots danced before her eyes, and in that moment, she knew with absolute certainty that Harold would kill her if not tonight, then soon. She had survived 3 years of escalating violence, but her luck had run out. Just as consciousness began to fade, Harold released her, and she collapsed to the floor, gasping. "Clean yourself up," he snarled. "I'm going back to the saloon, don't wait up." After he stormed out, Diana remained on the floor, drawing painful breaths through her bruised throat. She touched her cheek gingerly, feeling the heat and swelling that would bloom into a vivid bruise by morning. The burn on her back throbbed with fiery intensity. For the first time in years, something besides fear rose within her resolve. She couldn't survive another day in this house. Harold's rage was escalating, and she knew with terrible certainty that next time, he wouldn't stop choking her until she was dead. Deanna dragged herself up and moved through the house like a ghost. She found a small carpet bag in the attic and filled it with essentials: a change of clothes, her mother's locket, the small amount of money she had secretly saved from household expenses. She had no plan, nowhere to go, but staying meant certain death. As she changed into her plainest dress, wincing at the burn on her back, Deanna caught sight of herself in the bedroom mirror. The woman who stared back was a stranger, hollow-eyed and desperate, but with a flicker of determination that hadn't been there before. By the time she slipped out the back door into the velvet darkness, Deanna Zimmerman had made a decision. She would rather die under the open sky than in that house at Harold's hands. The night air was cool on her bruised face as she hurried through Brownsville's quiet streets. The saloon at the edge of town blazed with light and noise, and Deanna gave it a wide berth, knowing Harold would be inside. She had no destination in mind, only the driving need to put distance between herself and her husband before he returned home to find her gone. The livery stable at the edge of town was dark and quiet. Deanna hesitated, knowing that stealing a horse would make her a criminal, but desperation drove her forward. As she crept toward the stable door, a voice emerged from the shadows. "Mrs. Zimmerman." Deanna froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. A tall figure stepped out from beside the building. Wade O'Malley, his expression grave in the moonlight. "What happened to your face?" he asked quietly. Diana's hand flew to her cheek, though it was too dark for him to see the bruise clearly. I fell," she whispered, the lie automatic after years of practice. Wade stepped closer and she could see the disbelief in his eyes. "Did your husband do that to you?" The simple question, asked without judgment, broke something in Deanna. She nodded, unable to speak as tears welled in her eyes. "And your throat?" he asked, gesturing to the marks she couldn't hide. He would have killed me tonight," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "I can't go back." Wade's jaw tightened, and in the moonlight she could see a muscle working in his cheek. "Where were you planning to go?" Deanna looked down at the small carpet bag in her hand. "I don't know, anywhere. I just need to get away before he realizes I'm gone." A long silence stretched between them. Then Wade said, "My outfit is leaving at dawn, driving cattle north to Kansas." "I don't understand," Deanna said, confusion momentarily overriding her fear. "I'm offering you a way out," Wade clarified, his voice low and urgent. "It won't be easy or comfortable, but if you're willing to work and keep up, we can get you far away from here." Deanna stared at him in disbelief. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." Something flickered in Wade's eyes, compassion, perhaps, or recognition. "Let's just say I've seen what men like your husband can do. No one deserves to live in fear." Deanna hesitated, knowing that running away with a group of strange men carried its own dangers. But staying meant certain death at Harold's hands. "If I left with you, What would be expected of me? You'd cook for the outfit, help with camp chores, nothing more. Wade's voice was firm. You'd have my protection and that of my men. But I won't lie to you, it's a hard trail, and if your husband comes after you, there could be trouble. He will come after me, Deanna said with certainty. Not because he loves me, but because he considers me his property. Wade nodded grimly. Then we'll need to be careful. Can you ride? Yes. My father taught me before he died and left her destitute, forcing her to accept Harold's proposal to avoid the poorhouse. Deanna pushed the memory away. Yes, I can ride. Good, meet me at the creek crossing south of town in 1 hour. Bring only what you can carry on horseback, and wear something practical if you have it. Deanna clutched her bag tighter. Why are you really doing this? Wade's expression softened slightly. Maybe I believe everyone deserves a second chance. He tipped his hat and melted back into the shadows, leaving Deanna standing alone with a decision that would change her life forever. 1 hour later, Deanna waited by the creek crossing, her heart pounding with every sound in the darkness. She had changed into her simplest skirt and blouse, with a shawl to ward off the night chill. The burn on her back throbbed painfully, and her cheek had swollen, making it difficult to see clearly from her left eye. The soft nickering of horses announced Wade's arrival before she saw him. He rode up with a second mount, a gentle-looking bay mare. "This is Daisy," he said, handing Deanna the reins. "She's steady and won't give you trouble." Deanna stroked the mare's velvety nose, then looked up at Wade. "I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me yet," he said grimly. "We've got a long way to go, and your husband will notice you're missing by morning." As Deanna mounted Daisy with Wade's help, wincing at the pain in her back, she felt a curious lightness despite her fear. For the first time in years, she was making a choice for herself, taking action instead of enduring. Whether she survived or not, at least she would no longer be a victim awaiting execution. They rode in silence through the night, following faint trails that wound through mesquite and scrub. Deanna's body ached with each step of her mount, but she set her jaw against the pain. Dawn was breaking when they reached a small camp where a group of cowboys were already preparing to move out. "Boss, who's this?" asked a wiry young man, eyeing Deanna with surprise. "This is Mrs. Deanna," Wade said simply. "She's joining our outfit as cook." The cowboys exchanged glances but asked no questions, a courtesy Deanna was grateful for. A heavy-set older man approached, his weathered face creasing in concern as he noticed her bruised face. "Madam, I'm Doc, not a real doctor, mind you, but I handle the outfit's medical needs. Looks like you could use some attention." Deanna hesitated, then nodded. Her injuries needed treatment if she was to keep up with the cattle drive. Doc led her to his wagon and gently examined her face and throat. "Your husband's work?" he asked quietly as he applied a soothing salve to her cheek. Deanna stiffened. "How did you know?" Doc's eyes were kind but knowing. "Been around a long time, madam. Seen too many women with those kinds of marks." He gestured to her back. "Is there more?" Reluctantly, Deanna turned and lifted her blouse slightly to reveal the burn. Doc whistled softly. "That needs proper tending. I'll need to clean and dress it." As Doc worked, Wade approached with a tin cup of coffee. "We're moving out in 10 minutes. The herd's already on the move." He glanced at Deanna's injury and his expression hardened. "Doc, make sure she's fit to ride." "She shouldn't be riding at all with this burn," Doc muttered, "but I reckon staying put isn't an option." "No," Deanna said firmly. "It isn't." By mid-morning, they had left Brownsville far behind, the cattle moving steadily northward in a cloud of dust. Deanna rode in the chuck wagon with Doc, her back bandaged and her body aching but her spirit lighter than it had been in years. From time to time, Wade rode alongside to check on her, his face revealing nothing of his thoughts. Why did you really help me? Deanna asked during one such visit, her curiosity overcoming her usual caution. Wade was silent for so long that she thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, "My sister was married to a man like your husband. By the time I found out what was happening, it was too late." His voice was flat, but Deanna could hear the pain beneath it. "I couldn't help her. Maybe I can help you." Before Deanna could respond, shouts from the rear of the herd drew Wade's attention. He wheeled his horse around and galloped back, leaving Deanna to wonder about the sister he couldn't save. That evening, despite her injuries, Deanna insisted on helping prepare the meal for the outfit. The cowboys watched curiously as she took over the cooking, transforming simple trail rations into a satisfying stew. "Madam, that's the best meal we've had since leaving San Antonio," declared a young cowboy named Jesse, tipping his hat to her. Diana flushed with pleasure. It had been so long since anyone had appreciated her efforts or spoken to her with simple kindness. She glanced across the fire at Wade, who was deep in conversation with his trail boss, and wondered what would become of her when they reached Kansas. As the days passed, Deanna settled into the rhythm of the cattle drive. Her injuries began to heal, and with them, her spirit. The cowboys treated her with a gruff respect that soothed her battered self-esteem. Wade remained somewhat distant, though she often caught him watching her with an unreadable expression. 10 days into their journey, as they made camp near the Colorado River, the lookout spotted riders approaching from the south. Wade immediately ordered the camp secured and positioned his men strategically around the perimeter. "It's likely just another outfit," he told Deanna, "but stay close to Doc's wagon just in case." Deanna nodded, but a cold knot of fear formed in her stomach. As the riders drew nearer, she recognized the lead figure with sickening certainty, Harold, accompanied by several men who looked like hired guns. Wade noticed her expression and moved to stand beside her. "That's him, isn't it?" "Yes," she whispered. "Harold." Wade's hand moved to his revolver. "Stay behind me. No matter what happens, don't show yourself unless I tell you to." Diana retreated to the wagon as Harold and his men rode into the camp. From her hiding place, she could hear the conversation clearly. "I'm looking for my wife," Harold announced, his voice carrying the same commanding tone he used in business dealings. "She's run off, and I have reason to believe she's traveling with your outfit." "Don't know what you're talking about," Wade replied evenly. "We haven't seen any women since we left Brownsville." Harold's laugh held no humor. "Come now, O'Malley. My sources saw her leaving town with you. Deanna," he called out, "show yourself and I might not punish you too severely for this embarrassment." Deanna trembled, pressing herself deeper into the shadows of the wagon. The casual mention of punishment confirmed what she already knew: returning with Harold meant death, whether quick or slow. "Your wife isn't here," Wade insisted. "But if she ran from you, perhaps you should consider why." Harold's voice hardened. "My marriage is none of your concern, cowboy. If you're harboring my wife, you're interfering with my property." "A woman isn't property," Wade said, his tone dangerously quiet. "And if she chose to leave you, she had good reason." The tension in the air was palpable. Deanna heard the creak of saddle leather as Harold dismounted. "Search the camp," he ordered his men. "She's here somewhere." Deanna's heart pounded as footsteps approached the wagon. She pressed herself against the wooden side, praying for invisibility. Just as a shadow fell across the opening, a gunshot cracked through the air. "That's far enough," Wade's voice rang out. "Your next step will be your last." The standoff lasted an eternity. Then Harold's cold laugh broke the silence. "You'd kill for her, a woman you barely know." "She's not worth the bullet, O'Malley." "That's where you're wrong," Wade replied steadily. "Every person deserves to live without fear. Now take your men and ride out." "This isn't over," Harold promised. "I'll find her, and when I do, she'll wish she'd never been born." The threat hung in the air long after the sound of hoofbeats faded. Deanna remained frozen in her hiding place until Wade appeared at the wagon opening, his face grim. "He's gone for now," he said, extending his hand to help her down. "But he won't give up easily." Deanna's legs nearly buckled as relief flooded through her. "You could have been killed," she whispered. "All of you because of me." Wade's hand remained on her arm, steadying her. "That man doesn't see you as a person, Deanna, just a possession. No one deserves that kind of life." That night, as the camp settled uneasily into sleep with extra guards posted, Deanna couldn't rest. The confrontation with Harold had shaken her deeply. She sat by the dying fire, staring into the embers and wondering if she would ever truly be free of him. "You should get some sleep," Wade said, appearing silently beside her. "We move out at first light." Deanna nodded but made no move to leave. "He'll keep coming," she said softly. "As long as I'm alive, he'll hunt me." Wade settled beside her on the log. "Then we'll have to make sure he believes you're not alive to find." Deanna turned to him in confusion. "What do you mean?" "I've been thinking," Wade said, prodding the fire with a stick. "Your husband won't stop looking for you as long as he believes you're out there somewhere." "But if he thought you were dead?" "How would we convince him of that?" Wade's expression was thoughtful. "There's a canyon about 2 days' ride from here. Dangerous place. Flash floods have claimed many lives. If Harold were to find evidence that you'd perished there, he might give up the search." Deanna considered the idea, hope and fear warring within her. "What sort of evidence? Your dress, perhaps. Some personal items. Signs of a camp washed away." Wade met her eyes steadily. "It would mean leaving behind everything from your old life, becoming someone new." "I have nothing from that life I wish to keep," Deanna said firmly. Wade nodded, a hint of approval in his eyes. "Then we'll make it happen. But afterward you'll need a new identity, a new story." "And where would I go?" Deanna asked, the vastness of her uncertain future suddenly overwhelming. Wade was quiet for a moment, the firelight casting shadows across his face. "That would be up to you," he said finally. "But our outfit has a ranch in Kansas. You'd be welcome there for as long as you needed." Deanna stared into the fire, considering his words. The prospect of freedom, true freedom, was dizzying after years of captivity. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything." 2 days later they reached the canyon Wade had mentioned. It was a desolate, beautiful place, with steep walls rising from a dry riverbed that would become a raging torrent during flash floods. Deanna stood at the edge, looking down at the spot where her old life would symbolically end. "You're sure about this?" Wade asked, standing beside her with her blue dress folded over his arm, the same dress she had worn to dinner the night they met. Deanna nodded. "More sure than I've been about anything." She took the locket from around her neck, her last connection to her life before Harold, and pressed it into Wade's hand. "This too." Together they arranged the scene. The dress caught on rocks as if torn away by water, the locket nearby, signs of a camp that had been swept away by a sudden flood. Wade added a woman's boot he had purchased in the last town they passed through. "That should be enough," he said finally. "When Harold comes this way, and he'll find what appears to be evidence of your fate." Deanna looked at the scattered remnants of Deanna Zimmerman and felt an unexpected pang. Not grief exactly, but acknowledgement of an ending. "Who will I be now?" she asked softly. Wade studied her for a moment. "Who do you want to be?" The question took her by surprise. For so long her identity had been defined by others' daughter, wife, victim. Now the canvas of her life was suddenly blank, waiting for her to make the first mark. "Someone brave," she said finally. "Someone who chooses her own path." Wade's smile was brief but genuine. "I think you already are." As they rode away from the canyon, Diana felt lighter, as if she had shed more than just material possessions. The woman who had trembled under Harold Zimmerman's gaze was fading with every mile they traveled northward. 3 days later, a cowboy riding scout returned to the outfit with news. Harold Zimmerman and his men had been spotted examining the canyon. They found the dress and such, the scout reported. The old man seemed mighty affected, ranting and carrying on something fierce. Diana exchanged a glance with Wade. "Do you think he believed it?" she asked when they were alone. "Hard to say," Wade admitted. "But we've given him a plausible end to his search. Now we just need to get you far enough away that he'll never connect you with any new identity you create." As they continued north, Diana's role in the outfit evolved. No longer just the cook, she began helping with other tasks: mending, tending to minor injuries, even riding flank on the herd when hands were short. The physical work was demanding, but it strengthened both her body and her confidence. The bruises Harold had left faded, replaced by the honest marks of hard work under the sun. She also found herself drawn increasingly to Wade. His quiet strength and unwavering integrity were unlike anything she had experienced in a man. He treated her not as a fragile object to be possessed or protected, but as a capable equal with her own mind and will. One evening, as they sat by the fire after the other cowboys had retired, Diana found the courage to ask about his sister. "Emma," he said, his voice softening on the name. "She was younger than me by 6 years, beautiful, stubborn, full of life." "What happened to her?" Diana asked gently. Wade stared into the flames. "She married too young to a man named Marshall who seemed respectable. I was working cattle up in Wyoming when they wed. By the time I came home 2 years later, she was changed, quiet, jumpy, refused to talk about it." He paused, his jaw tightening. "I should have seen the signs, should have done something sooner, but I didn't want to interfere in her marriage." Diana reached out impulsively, covering his hand with hers. "It wasn't your fault. One night, Marshall came home drunk and beat her so badly she lost the baby she was carrying," Wade continued, his voice hollow. "She finally tried to run, but he caught her, by the time I got there." He trailed off, unable to finish. "I'm so sorry," Diana whispered, her throat tight with emotion. Wade turned his hand over, his fingers intertwining with hers. "After Emma died, I swore I'd never stand by again if I saw someone in that situation. When I noticed your bruises that night at dinner, when I saw the fear in your eyes, I knew I had to help, whatever the cost." Diana felt tears burning behind her eyes. "You saved my life," she said simply. "You saved yourself," Wade corrected her. "You found the courage to leave." "I just offered a way." Their hands remained linked as the fire burned low, a connection that needed no words. As the days stretched into weeks, the cattle drive moved steadily northward through Texas and into Indian Territory. The landscape changed around them, growing greener and less harsh. Diana changed too, her skin tanning in the sun, her hands growing calloused from work, her spirit strengthening day by day. Her feelings for Wade deepened, though she kept them carefully guarded. After her experience with Harold, the idea of belonging to any man again filled her with dread. Yet Wade never tried to possess her or control her, never raised his voice or used his considerable strength to intimidate. Instead, he showed her respect, valued her opinions, and gradually earned her trust. One afternoon, as they crossed a small stream, Wade rode up beside her. "There's a settlement about 5 miles ahead," he said. "We'll stop there for supplies. Might be a good place for you to get some things you need." Diana nodded, suddenly self-conscious of her appearance. She had been wearing borrowed clothes since leaving Brownsville, men's shirts and trousers that Doc had altered to fit her slender frame. I should probably find something more appropriate. Wade's eyes crinkled at the corners. You look fine to me. The simple comment brought warmth to Deanna's cheeks. She looked away, confused by her reaction. After Harold's constant criticism, Wade's casual approval was both unfamiliar and deeply affecting. The settlement was little more than a trading post and a few scattered buildings, but to Deanna, it represented her first appearance in civilization as a free woman. As she wandered through the small general store, selecting fabric for a new dress and other necessities, she felt both exhilarated and terrified. What if someone recognized her? What if word got back to Harold somehow? You all right? Wade asked, appearing beside her with supplies for the outfit. Deanna realized she had been standing frozen, staring at a shelf of ribbons. Just adjusting, she admitted. It feels strange to be around people again. Wade nodded in understanding. We're far from Texas now. And to anyone who asks, you're Deanna O'Connor, my widowed cousin traveling to Kansas to start a new life. Deanna tested the name silently. Deanna O'Connor, a new identity to match her new beginning. Your cousin, she asked, raising an eyebrow. Wade's mouth quirked in a half-smile. Had to explain your presence somehow. Unless you'd prefer another relation, the question hung between them, laden with unspoken meaning. Deanna looked away, unprepared to answer what he might really be asking. Cousin is fine for now, she said softly. That night, camped outside the settlement, Deanna worked on her new dress by firelight. The simple task of creating something for herself, making choices about color and style, felt revolutionary after years of having every aspect of her life controlled. That's a pretty color, Wade commented, settling beside her with his usual quiet grace. Deanna smoothed the green fabric. It reminded me of the hills we passed last week, so much greener than Brownsville. It'll suit you, Wade said, then cleared his throat. Deanna, there's something I should tell you. She set aside her sewing, alarmed by his serious tone. What is it? When we reach Kansas, I'll be staying at the ranch through winter, he began. It's a good place, peaceful, removed from big settlements. You'd be welcome to stay too, as I said before. But I want you to know that you have choices. If you'd rather go to a city, start fresh somewhere else, I can arrange it. Deanna studied his face in the firelight, seeing the careful neutrality he was trying to maintain. Are you trying to be rid of me, Wade O'Malley? God, no, he said with unexpected vehemence. Then, more controlled. No, just making sure you know you're free to choose your own path. Deanna resumed her sewing, considering his words. The idea of leaving Wade and the safety he represented was terrifying. Yet she recognized the gift he was offering, the freedom to make her own decision without pressure or obligation. I think, she said carefully, that I'd like to see this ranch of yours, at least for a while. The relief on Wade's face was impossible to miss, though he tried to hide it. It settled then. As the weeks passed and they crossed into Kansas, Deanna's nightmares about Harold began to fade. In their place came dreams of open skies and freedom, and increasingly, of Wade, his smile, his hands, the way he looked at her when he thought she wouldn't notice. One evening, as they made camp for the final night before reaching the ranch, a violent storm swept across the plains. The cowboys struggled to keep the cattle from stampeding in the driving rain and thunder. Deanna helped Doc secure the wagons, her dress plastered to her skin, her hair escaping its pins in wild disarray. Get to shelter, Wade shouted over the howling wind, appearing suddenly beside her. The lightning's getting worse. Before she could respond, a deafening crack split the air as lightning struck a nearby tree. The cattle, already nervous, broke into a frenzied run. Wade pulled Deanna against him, shielding her with his body as the edge of the herd thundered past. Are you hurt? he demanded when the immediate danger had passed, his hands moving over her shoulders, her face checking for injuries. "I'm fine," Deanna gasped, her heart racing from more than just the near miss with the stampede. Wade's touch, though born of concern, awakened sensations she had thought long dead. "Really, I'm all right." Wade didn't release her immediately. Rain streamed down his face, plastering his sandy hair to his forehead. His blue eyes searched hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Diana," he began, his voice rough with emotion. A shout from one of the cowboys interrupted whatever he had been about to say. Reluctantly, Wade stepped back. "We need to round up the cattle. Stay with Doc." Deanna watched him go, her body still tingling from his touch. For the first time since leaving Brownsville, she allowed herself to acknowledge the truth. She was falling in love with Wade O'Malley. The realization was both wonderful and terrifying. By dawn, the storm had passed and the cattle had been gathered. The outfit moved out for the final leg of their journey, everyone exhausted but relieved that the drive was nearly complete. Deanna rode beside Doc's wagon, lost in thought about the previous night's moment with Wade, who had been busy since dawn and had barely spoken to her. "That's it up ahead," Doc said, interrupting her reverie and pointing to a ridge in the distance. "Pine Creek Ranch." Deanna shaded her eyes against the morning sun, taking in the sight of the place that might become her home. Nestled against rolling hills and sheltered by a stand of pines that gave the ranch its name, the collection of buildings looked solid and welcoming. A two-story main house, a large barn, bunkhouses, corrals, all well-maintained and prosperous-looking. "It's beautiful," she murmured. Doc nodded in agreement. "Wade's been building it up for 5 years now. Started with nothing but that old cabin there." He pointed to a small structure near the tree line, and turned it into one of the finest spreads in the territory. As they approached, people emerged from the building's ranch hands, a cook, and an older woman who stood on the main house porch with her hands on her hips, watching their arrival with evident satisfaction. "That's Martha," Doc explained, "Wade's aunt. She keeps the house and rules the roost around here. Don't let her stern look fool you, she's got a heart as big as Kansas." Diana felt a flutter of anxiety. Would Wade's aunt welcome a strange woman with a mysterious past? What would she tell these people about who she was and why she had come? Wade rode up beside them as they neared the ranch yard. "Welcome to Pine Creek," he said to Deanna, a warmth in his eyes that eased her nerves somewhat. "Martha's expecting you. I told her my cousin needed a fresh start." "Your cousin," Deanna repeated, wondering how long the pretense would need to continue. Wade's expression turned serious. "Just until we're sure you're safe. I don't think Harold could track you here, but I won't take chances with your life." Before Deanna could respond, they were surrounded by the bustle of arrival cowboys dismounting, cattle being herded into corrals, Martha descending from the porch to greet them. "About time you got back," she called to Wade, her stern expression softening as he swung down from his horse to embrace her. "Was beginning to think you'd decided to settle in Texas." "Not likely," Wade laughed. "Martha, this is my cousin Deanna O'Connor. Deanna, my Aunt Martha O'Malley." Martha's sharp eyes took in Deanna's trail-worn appearance and the fading bruise on her cheek. Something like understanding passed across her weathered face. "Welcome to Pine Creek, child. You look like you could use a hot bath and a proper meal." Deanna dismounted, suddenly aware of how she must appear after weeks on the trail. "Thank you for having me, Mrs. O'Malley. I don't want to impose." "Nonsense," Martha cut her off, taking her arm firmly. "Any family of Wade's is welcome here." She shot a meaningful look at her nephew. "Though I suspect there's more to the story than cousin. Come along now, let's get you settled while these men tend to business." Diana glanced back at Wade as Martha led her toward the house. He nodded encouragingly, and she felt a surge of gratitude for this man who had risked so much to help her. The main house was spacious and comfortable, with solid furniture and colorful quilts that softened the frontier practicality. Martha showed Deanna to a bedroom on the second floor, clean and bright with a view of the distant hills. "The bathroom's down the hall," Martha said. "I'll have hot water brought up, and there are fresh clothes in the chest. They may need taking in, but they'll do until we can see about getting you properly outfitted." Diana stood in the middle of the room, overwhelmed by the kindness of these strangers. "I don't know how to thank you," Martha's expression softened. "No need for thanks. Wade's letter said you needed help, and that's enough for me." She paused, studying Deanna's face. "Whatever brought you here, whatever you're running from, you're safe now." When Martha left, Deanna sank onto the bed, touching the clean quilt in wonder. After weeks of sleeping on the ground or in wagons, the simple comfort was almost overwhelming. She allowed herself a moment to absorb the reality she was hundreds of miles from Harold, in a place he could never find her, surrounded by people who seemed genuinely kind. For the first time since fleeing Brownsville, Deanna dared to think about a future not just surviving day to day, but building a life. What that life might look like, and whether Wade would be part of it, remained to be seen. After bathing and changing into a borrowed dress that hung somewhat loosely on her frame, Diana made her way downstairs. The house was quiet, most of the ranch hands presumably still busy with the cattle. She found Martha in the kitchen, preparing what appeared to be enough food for an army. "There you are," Martha said approvingly. "Feel better?" "Much," Deanna admitted. "Can I help with anything?" Martha pointed to a pile of potatoes. "You can peel those if you've a mind to. The men will be hungry after getting those cattle settled." As they worked side by side, Deanna found herself relaxing in Martha's no-nonsense presence. The older woman asked few questions, seeming content to let Deanna volunteer information when she was ready. "Wade says you're a fine cook," Martha commented as they prepared the meal. "Says you kept the whole outfit fed better than they'd ever been on a cattle drive." Deanna smiled at the unexpected compliment. "I've always enjoyed cooking. My mother taught me before she passed." "And your husband?" Martha asked casually, though her eyes were shrewd. "Wade mentioned you were widowed." Diana's hand stilled on the potato she was peeling. "Yes," she said carefully. "My husband is no longer in my life." Martha nodded, accepting the vague answer without pressing further. "Well, you're welcome here for as long as you need. Pine Creek's a good place to heal." By the time Wade and the Cowboys came in for supper, Diana had helped prepare a feast worthy of their homecoming. The large dining room filled with the sounds of hungry men appreciating a home-cooked meal after months on the trail. Diana found herself seated beside Wade at the long table. He had cleaned up, his hair still damp from washing, wearing a fresh shirt that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. "You look better," he said quietly, while the others were engaged in boisterous conversation. "More rested." "I feel better," Deanna admitted. "Your aunt has been very kind," Wade smiled. "Martha doesn't do anything by halves, including welcoming strangers." He hesitated, then added, "I hope you'll be comfortable here." "I already am," Deanna assured him, surprised to realize it was true. Something about Pine Creek felt right, perhaps, because it was so different from the stifling mansion in Brownsville, perhaps because of the honest, straightforward people who inhabited it. Or perhaps, she acknowledged to herself, because of the man beside her. In the days that followed, Deanna settled into life at Pine Creek Ranch. Martha showed her the routines of the household, but never treated her as a servant, rather as a partner in maintaining the home. Deanna learned to make soap from rendered fat and lye, to preserve the summer's bounty for winter, to bake bread in the large oven that served the ranch. Wade was often busy with ranch business, riding out at dawn and returning at dusk. When their paths crossed, there was a new awkwardness between them, as if without the immediate goal of reaching Kansas safely, neither knew quite how to define their relationship. One evening about 2 weeks after their arrival, Deanna found Wade alone on the porch, watching the sunset paint the distant hills in gold and purple. "May I join you?" she asked hesitantly. He turned, his face lighting up at the sight of her in a way that made her heart beat faster. "Please do." Deanna settled beside him on the porch swing, careful to maintain a proper distance. "The ranch is beautiful," she said. "You've built something wonderful here." "It's been my dream since I was a boy," Wade admitted. "A place of my own, far from towns and troubles." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the light fade from the sky. Finally, Deanna gathered her courage to ask the question that had been on her mind. "Wade, what happens now? With me, I mean. I can't impose on your hospitality forever." Wade's profile was serious in the gathering dusk. "You're not imposing, Deanna. I meant it when I said you could stay as long as you wish." He turned to face her. "But I understand if you want to move on, make a completely fresh start somewhere else." "That's not what I meant," Deanna said quickly. "I love it here. I feel safe, at peace." She took a deep breath. "But I'm living under false pretenses. Everyone believes I'm your cousin, a respectable widow. If they knew the truth, that I'm a runaway wife, that my husband may still be hunting for me, no one here would judge you for escaping a man who abused you," Wade interrupted firmly. "And as for Harold Zimmerman, I've taken precautions. I have friends keeping an eye on his movements. Last report says he returned to Brownsville, apparently convinced by our ruse at the canyon." Relief washed over Deanna at this news. "Truly? You think he believed I died?" "It seems so. He sold his business and moved to San Antonio, according to my sources." Wade's expression darkened. "Though I'll continue to watch, just to be certain." Deanna leaned back against the swing, processing this information. If Harold truly believed her dead, then perhaps she really could start anew. "As for your place here," Wade continued, his voice carefully measured, "that's entirely up to you. You could remain as my cousin, if that makes you comfortable. Martha knows there's more to your story, but she'll respect whatever tale we choose to tell." "And if I don't want to be your cousin?" Deanna asked softly, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure he must hear it. Wade went very still. "What would you want to be then?" Deanna gathered all her courage, remembering the frightened woman she had been in Brownsville and marveling at how far she had come. "I think I would like to be myself, Deanna. Not Zimmerman anymore, but not pretending to be someone I'm not either." Wade's voice was husky when he spoke. "And who is Deanna if not my cousin?" She met his gaze directly, letting him see the feelings she had tried to hide. "That depends on you, I suppose, on what you want." In one fluid motion, Wade moved closer, taking her hands in his. "What I want," he said, each word deliberate, "is for you to be happy, safe, and free to choose your own path. If that path leads away from Pine Creek, I'll understand. But if it could lead to me—" He paused, his eyes searching hers. "Deanna, I've grown to care for you more than I thought possible. But after what you've endured, the last thing I want is to make you feel pressured or obligated." Deanna felt tears spring to her eyes, not from sorrow but from a joy so intense it was almost painful. "Wade O'Malley," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "you are nothing like Harold. You saved my life, but more than that, you taught me that I'm strong enough to save myself. You've never once made me feel afraid or small or worthless." Wade's hands tightened on hers. "I never would, I never could." "I know," Deanna said simply, "and that's why I've fallen in love with you." The words, once spoken, seemed to hang in the air between them. Then Wade released her hands only to gently cup her face, his touch reverent. "May I kiss you?" he asked, a question Harold had never bothered with. Deanna nodded, and then his lips were on hers, gentle at first, then with growing passion as she responded. It was nothing like the demanding, possessive kisses Harold had forced on her. This was a communion of equals, a promise of partnership rather than ownership. When they finally parted, both breathless, Wade rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Deanna. I think I have since the moment you stood up to Harold at the canyon, refusing to let fear defeat you." Deanna smiled, remembering that moment of defiance. "I was terrified," she admitted, "but less afraid of dying than of returning to that life." "You'll never have to be afraid again," Wade promised, drawing her closer. "Not of me, not of Harold, not of anything I can protect you from." They remained on the porch swing as stars appeared in the darkening sky, talking of the future, a future that seemed suddenly bright with possibility. Wade spoke of making their relationship official, of introducing Diana to the community not as his cousin, but as the woman he intended to court properly. "People will talk," Diana warned, practical despite her happiness. A mysterious woman appearing suddenly at Pine Creek with no verifiable past. Wade shrugged, unconcerned. "Let them talk. The people who matter will accept you because I do. The rest don't signify." His confidence bolstered Deanna's own. She had survived Harold's brutality, had found the courage to flee, had crossed half a continent to build a new life. Surely she could face a few wagging tongues. The following Sunday, Diana attended the small church in the nearest town with Wade and Martha. She wore her new green dress, completed during evenings by the fire, and held her head high as Wade proudly introduced her to the community. There were curious glances and whispered comments, but also genuine welcomes and invitations to social gatherings. As autumn deepened into winter, Diana's place at Pine Creek became more established. She worked alongside Martha in managing the household, learned the business of the ranch from Wade, and slowly built relationships with neighbors and ranch hands. Her nightmares about Harold grew less frequent, replaced by dreams of the future she was creating. In late November, as the first snow dusted the Kansas hills, Wade took Deanna on a ride to a secluded spot on the ranch, a small lake, now partially frozen, surrounded by pines. "I come here to think," he told her as they dismounted. "It reminds me why I chose this land." Deanna turned slowly, taking in the pristine beauty of the place. "It's perfect," she breathed, her words forming clouds in the cold air. Wade took her gloved hands in his. "Deanna, these past months have been the happiest of my life. Having you here, watching you bloom away from Harold's shadow, falling more in love with you each day." He paused, suddenly looking uncharacteristically nervous. "I brought you here because I want to ask you something important, but first, I need you to know that your freedom is precious to me. I never want to do anything that makes you feel trapped or controlled." Deanna's heart quickened. "Wade, you've never made me feel anything but respected and cherished." He nodded, visibly gathering his courage. "Then, Deanna, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Not to possess you or control you, but to build a life together as partners, to face whatever comes side by side." Joy surged through Deanna, bright and pure. This proposal bore no resemblance to Harold's calculating offer years before. This was born of love, respect, and genuine partnership. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and certain. "Yes, I will marry you, Wade O'Malley." His face lit with a smile that warmed her more than any fire could have. He drew her into his arms, kissing her with a tenderness that made her eyes sting with tears of happiness. "I promise you," he said when they parted, that you will never regret this decision. I will spend my life making sure of it." "I know," Deanna said simply. And she did know with a certainty that ran bone deep. Wade was a man of his word, a man of honor and kindness. With him, she had found not just safety, but joy, respect, and a love she had never imagined possible. They were married on Christmas Eve in the ranch house parlor with Martha, Doc, and the ranch hands as witnesses. Deanna wore a dress of deep blue velvet, ordered specially from Kansas City, with her hair arranged in soft waves around her face. Wade, in a new suit that made him look impossibly handsome, watched her come down the stairs with an expression of such adoration that Deanna felt tears threaten. The local minister performed the ceremony, and when Wade slipped a simple gold band onto Deanna's finger, she felt the last shadows of her life with Harold finally lift. This ring wasn't a shackle but a promise freely given, joyfully accepted. That night, as snow fell softly outside their bedroom window, Deanna discovered what love between equals truly meant. Wade's touch was reverent, his passion tempered with tenderness, his concern for her comfort and pleasure paramount. For the first time, Deanna understood that physical love could be a communion rather than a conquest, a giving rather than a taking. As they lay together afterward, Diana's head resting on Wade's chest, his heartbeat strong and steady beneath her ear, she marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment. "What are you thinking?" Wade asked, stroking her hair. Deanna propped herself up to look at him, taking in the beloved lines of his face in the soft lamplight. "I'm thinking that I never imagined being this happy," she admitted. "When I was with Harold, I thought my life was over before it had really begun. Now I feel like it's just starting." Wade pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "We have a lifetime ahead of us," he promised, "and I intend to fill every day of it with as much happiness as I can give you." Spring came to Pine Creek Ranch in a riot of wildflowers and new growth. Deanna, now officially Mrs. O'Malley, had fully embraced her role as the ranch mistress. She had added her own touches to the main house, planted a vegetable garden that promised a bountiful harvest, and become a respected figure in the small community nearby. One evening in April, as Diana and Wade sat on their porch watching the sunset, a ritual they had maintained since that first evening when they had declared their feelings, Diana took her husband's hand and placed it gently on her still flat stomach. "Wade," she said softly, "we're going to have a baby." The wonder and joy that transformed his face was something Deanna knew she would remember all her days. "Truly," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. Deanna nodded, her own eyes shining. "The doctor confirmed it yesterday when I went into town. We should welcome our child in November." Wade gathered her carefully into his arms, as if she had suddenly become fragile, precious cargo. "Deanna," he murmured against her hair, "you have made me the happiest man alive." As Deanna leaned into his embrace, feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart against hers, she marveled at the twisting path that had led her here. From the desperate woman fleeing certain death in Brownsville to becoming the beloved wife of Wade O'Malley and mother of his child, it was a journey she could never have imagined when she slipped out of Harold's house that fateful night. "I love you, Wade O'Malley," she said, lifting her face to his. "Thank you for helping me disappear so I could truly be found." Wade's kiss was tender, a promise renewed. "No, my love, thank you for being brave enough to start again. You saved yourself, I just had the privilege of being there to see it happen." As twilight deepened into night, Diana and Wade remained on the porch, talking softly of the future, of the child they would welcome, of the life they were building together at Pine Creek. Above them, stars appeared one by one in the vast Kansas sky, witnesses to a love that had triumphed over cruelty and fear. Deanna Zimmerman had disappeared, but Deanna O'Malley had been born a woman who knew her own strength, who had found love on her own terms, and who would never again let anyone dim her light. And in the years that followed, as their family grew with the addition of a son named James, and later a daughter they called Emma, after Wade's sister Deanna would sometimes think of the frightened woman she had once been. Not with regret or sorrow, but with compassion and pride for how far she had come. For she had learned the most important lesson of all, that sometimes disappearing from one life was the only way to truly appear in another one filled with the love, respect, and joy she had always deserved.